Shalom and welcome to Temple Talk. Rabbi Chaim Richman here, together with Yitzchak Reuven in Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh, the holy city of Jerusalem. Today being the 12th day of the month of Sivan, 5777. It's June the 6th, 2017. And this week, the Torah portion of Beha'alotcha, when you cause the flames of the menorah to rise up, the third Torah portion of the book of Bamidbar. Magnificent Torah portion. Today, actually, Yitzchak Reuven,
yes,
you
sir.
probably remember, is a special date on the calendar of the Holy Temple. Do you remember why?
It's the 12th day of Sivan, and it's the 7th day from the
Following
the holiday, the festival of Shavuot, and it was during these 7 days that they had special status, and people were bringing their offerings throughout all of these, their Shavuot offerings throughout all of these days, because frankly, Shavuot is a one-day festival, and there's just not enough time for everyone to be able to bring their various offerings.
Right, because in addition to the communal offerings, so individuals, families would be bringing the special holiday Thanksgiving offerings and offerings of vows. There were so many offerings that were brought by the people that they couldn't all be managed on the first day, on the only day, on Shavuot itself. So actually, there were a vast number that were brought the day after Shavuot on Isru Chag, and this continued until the 12th day of the month of Sivan.
Which is reflected to this day in our prayer.
Yes.
Because we don't say the Tachanun.
So there's kind of like a minor festival aspect to the immediate days following Shavuot that is reflected in our prayer. That is true. So my point being, of course, that the whole calendar is infused with and is affected by and is saturated really by the presence of the Holy Temple, whether or not it's actually standing right now. We live our lives according to the concept of the Holy Temple because it is going to be rebuilt, and everything is pointing out to that, and it's so powerfully resonant, the idea that the Holy Temple is such a major part of our lives that the first thing I'm going to say on this radio show is that, hey, these are the very days that there's a lot of offerings being brought in the Holy Temple because the people just came up to the temple for Shavuot with all their offerings. But listen, here we are in June of 2017, which is 50 years after June of 1967. And as you know, we here in Jerusalem celebrated Jerusalem Day on the 28th day of the month of Iyar, because that on the Hebrew calendar is the actual day of the unification of Jerusalem. But as far as the secular calendar is concerned, it was June 7th, 1967, which is tomorrow.
All right, which means the war began on June 5th.
Right.
And so we're in the midst of that war 50 years later.
In any event, these celebrations of what we call the Jubilee year of the 67 unification of Israel, Judea and Samaria and Jerusalem, this is being celebrated all year round, really. There are all sorts of events and symposiums and special events, and I believe that I read in the news that the United Nations Secretary of General, speaking in the UN about the anniversary of Israel's 1967 Six-Day War, took the opportunity to criticize Israel's occupation of Palestinian homeland, and he expressed the idea that there'll never be true peace in the region until the Palestinian people can have their natural aspiration for their natural homeland, their dream, that it shouldn't only be a dream. And that, of course, is fake news. Because what happened 50 years ago, much to the world's chagrin and much to the unforgiving world, was that Israel, upon being attacked by hostile Arab armies, won.
And liberated lands that belong to Israel.
And liberated lands that belong to Israel. And that is something that it seems we can't be forgiven for.
No.
So, it all started there. And as we've mentioned many times, it's Israel's own lack of clarity, Israel's own ambivalence, Israel's own wavering over what it is that we're doing here exactly that is the cause of most of the problem. There's a severe housing shortage in Israel, and real estate is very, very expensive. So there's a whole idea that's being proposed now by the local councils of Judea and Samaria that you can relieve the terrible overcrowding conditions in the Tel Aviv region by building a lot of houses in Judea and Samaria, which is only a few minutes from Tel Aviv. And I believe that the number of people that they said that they build houses for is like 340,000 more housing units in Judea and Samaria. And that is like, duh. That is like, you're thinking of that only now after 50 years? Like, obviously this is our land. Like, why not build there? Why not encourage people to live there? And of course, once there was encouraging people to live there from the governments of Israel. But the point is, this has become this whole elephant in the room, if I might go there again. Like, what? Actually, it's not even an elephant. It's not being ignored at all.
If we start building, Trump might not move the embassy to Jerusalem. Oh, wait a minute. He didn't move the embassy to Jerusalem. He did sell $1 bazillion worth of weaponry to Saudi Arabia, but as far as compensation to Israel, he came and he spoke nicely and went back and signed the waiver once again, which postpones the moving of the embassy.
Unbelievable. Who's surprised?
Yeah.
Who's surprised? Who thought that Trump was David, king of Israel, in Gematria? Who thought that Trump was the new Cyrus, who's giving permission to the Jews to rebuild the Holy Temple? Who thought that Trump was the Great Hope? Who thought all these things?
Trump Why are we still cowering? Why don't we go ahead and build? And why don't we go ahead and apply Israeli law to
now,
Judea
of course,
and Samaria?
I got it right here. The United Nations, United States ambassador to the United Nations,
Nikki Haley?
she said that actually the United States is still planning it. He hasn't changed his mind.
Sleeping.
He wants to move the embassy to Jerusalem,
of course,
but he wants that move to be part of the peace process. She said. She said it's not a question of if, it's just a question of when.
It's a question of price. What will be willing to pay?
How much is he going to squeeze out of us? Exactly.
Right.
She says, I think that he knows that it could very much be part of the peace process. And so I think that what he did want to do is make sure that he wasn't interrupting the negotiations that are happening with the peace process. Yitzchak, I wasn't aware that there aren't any negotiations going on.
I've got news for Nikki Haley, who's a wonderful woman, and I appreciate and admire what she's doing. Whatever sliver of a chance that he had of creating a peace process, he killed by not moving the embassy, because it's the same old, same old. The Arabs, with all his talk, everything else, the Arabs say, oh, he's the same old American president. They've all been this way. They won't do a thing, and we don't need to budge.
For all those who are less familiar, in 1995, a decision was made by Congress to move
and of course this was at the height of the quote peace process. This is when everything was going wonderful.
In 1995 that the United States Embassy must be moved to Jerusalem. Every single U.S. president, beginning with Bill Clinton, since 1995, has waived the implementation of that decision by signing a waiver every 6 months. The last person to do that at the start of December was Barack Hussein Obama, and now, in case you ever get them confused, Barack Hussein Obama and Donald J. Trump, because they kind of look alike. In case you get them confused, actually Donald J. Trump just did the exact same thing, thereby breaking his campaign promise, and as far as Yitzchak Reuven is concerned, proving that he's a sad loser. And I'll tell you why. Because he could have achieved his tremendous legacy here by standing up to the Arab world, by really showing that he means what he said in his commitment to Israel. He said, you're going to feel the love. You're going to feel so much love. We love you so much. It's going to be different. Everything is going to be different now. And you know what? He came, and people were so excited. Some people were, and tell me something, it's like, did we get anything out of this at all? I know that he sold like $1 gazillion billion worth of sophisticated weaponry to Saudi Arabia, and he had a whole Arab summit in Saudi Arabia, and I know that he met with Abbas, and Abbas told him that he's raising the Palestinian children to peace, and all this kind of thing.
And we all know that he yelled at Abbas and said, "Ooh, you lied to me. You're not. You're funding terror, etc., etc." Okay, very good.
But again, parashat Beha'alotcha, beginning with the light of the menorah, the dedication of the Levites, the Pesach offering in the wilderness, Pesach Sheni, and the divine signs of the camp of Israel in the desert, and everything that's going on, the prophecy of Moshe, the unequal stature of Moshe, everything about this Torah portion is the vibrancy, the validity, the continuity, the continuum of the people of Israel centered around the Torah as the center of their life, the Holy Temple as the center of their life, and nothing can change that. So here we are, 50 years after the liberation of Jerusalem, and I read a horrible article in the paper today about how the ex-chief of education of the IDF, there's this whole expose that was in Rocheva, that commanders are not allowed to speak to the soldier of the IDF and refer to Jerusalem as being liberated.
Right.
There's a whole thing going on in the IDF. It's a whole kind of like struggle for the soul of the army, and they don't want the soldiers to have these nationalistic / religious feelings and traditional feelings about Jerusalem, and that is like so sick. In other words, like they're what are the soldiers fighting for? Aren't they supposed to feel that Jerusalem is ours, that it's our heart, that it's our united capital? But see, that's already a politicization of the IDF, that they're not even allowed to talk to the soldiers and encourage them to feel nationalistic feelings. So what I'm saying is, here we are, parashat Beha'alotcha, poised in the desert, about to go in, so close we can feel it, getting all of these instructions, keep them in the light of the menorah burning, and everything. And here we are, 50 years after the unification of Jerusalem. And what I'm reading about also in this parsha is the complainers and the rabble that seeked to cultivate a craving.
Right.
Like something is always not good enough for some people, and these are patterns that are destined to repeat themselves. And of course, as we know, because we have hindsight and foresight, and we know next week we're going to be reading Parashat Shalach, and we're going to know about the ultimate failure of that generation to go into the land of Israel, but we are not destined to relive it. But what I see in these patterns of self-destruction, and in these patterns of self-immolation and denial, and you know, this whole idea about not being convinced of our own rights here. Oh, don't let the soldiers think that they have a reason to fight for. Don't encourage people to live in Judea and Samaria. And I mean, what is the celebration all about this year, and the millions of dollars that are being sunk in the most beautiful and elaborate celebrations? And our friend Shlomo Ne'aman, who we know very well, who is a Temple Mount activist, who was elected to be the head of the Gush Etzion Regional Council, and then it came out that Gush Etzion, which is within the consensus, which is a settlement block here in Israel, where 2 of my children live. And it turned out that the planning committee, it's like a big deal. They have this planning committee that allows, you know, that authorizes a certain amount of units to be built in Judea and Samaria. And every time they talk about, oh, they authorized 2,000, they authorized 3,000 units, and then the left goes all up in arms and everything like that. How could you do that? The international community is going to be angry. Don't build any houses. Don't build a kindergarten. Don't extend your balcony if you live in Jerusalem, and all this kind of thing. Shlomo Ne'aman, who is the elected head of the Gush Etzion Regional Council, the main celebration of 50 years of Judea and Samaria's liberation is going to be held in Gush Etzion. He made a statement the other day in the papers. He said, you know what? He addressed the government. He said, do me a favor, don't come. Don't bother coming to the celebrations that we're holding in our regional council if you're not willing to build even one house in this area and thereby demonstrate that you believe that we really should be here. So what I'm saying is there's this whole confusion going on. Now, Donald J. Trump added to it a great deal, in my opinion, by being a sad loser, and by, instead of keeping his promise to move the embassy, and instead of doing everything that he said he would do about how at Israel. I remember the things that he said, like over the first few weeks, like he was saying these incredible things about how Israel has been degraded by Obama and it's never going to happen again, and we're never going to allow these terrible insults and all the things that he did, and instead we're going to you're going to feel how much we love you and all this kind of thing. If he would have made good on any of that, that would have been such a statement to the Arab world. But instead, he is a Barack Obama lookalike. He signed the waiver, and not out of what the other presidents, Clinton and Obama, what they always said, that it was a question of the United States' national security interest. I can't tell you, it's top secret. He said no. The speculation, at least Nikki Haley, they're all saying it has to do with the fact that, he's about to start a whole process of negotiation, so it's better that he should hold on to the reins. You understand? So what are we going to have to give up for them to move the embassy? Do I need the United States of America's embassy moving from Yarkon Street in Tel Aviv to Jerusalem to show me, to prove to me, to allow me to feel or think or know that Jerusalem is my capital? Do I need them to do me that favor? I don't think so. But I want to tell you something. It's much deeper than this, how everything is connected, okay? So he comes here, Trump, and he meets with Abbas, the Holocaust denier, the professor of murder, the godfather, as he's been called, of the PLO. And in Abbas's statement on the 50th anniversary of the Six-Day War, his movement, Fatah, makes a statement. And the statement is to emphasize in the natural historical rights of the Palestinians and the removal of the occupation and the 67 borders before June 4th, 1967, with Eastern Jerusalem as its capital. That's the only way to achieve peace, stability, and security in the Middle East. And Fatah blasted settlements, in quotation marks, as a war crime based on a racist and terrorist ideology, okay? Here's Mahmoud Abbas telling us about terrorist ideology. And he said that we must continue the violent struggle against Israel. The same Fatah, which is part of the same Palestinian Authority that names schools, public squares, and community centers after terrorists who murdered Israeli citizens, even though he tells the president that he is all for peace. So what is the connection between this and what's happening all over the world? What is the connection between Trump not moving the embassy and what happened in London, for example? Terrible, terrible terrorist incident that happened in London just a few days ago. Is there any connection? Before I mention that, I just want to, before I forget, I want to mention that, Yitzchak, there's been a trend that you and I have noticed over the past few weeks, that certain major news outlets, at least some Jewish news outlets here in Israel, have really made a reversal, and in recent weeks, they have started referring to the Western Wall not as the holiest place in Judaism, but as the holiest place where Jews can pray.
Yeah, where Jews are permitted to pray.
Where Jews are permitted to pray.
Right.
Because it's really begun to sink in and make a difference. Everything that we've been trying to do for the past 30 years, this re-education of our people, to get everyone to understand that the Temple Mount is the holiest place for the Jewish people, the only holy place for the Jewish people. And the way that we describe the Western Wall is that's the holiest place where Jews are allowed to pray. It's the closest in proximity, but it is not the holiest place at all. So to my great satisfaction, many news outlets are starting, the Times of Israel in several articles has referred to, and even the Jerusalem Post has referred to the Western Wall as the holiest place where Jews can pray. Now, as opposed to the standard fare that's always been the position of the Palestinians, all of a sudden, a top official, Jibril Rajoub, a top murderer, of Fatah Central Committee member Jibril Rajoub, he goes and he says on Israeli television that actually the Western Wall is sacred to the Jewish people and it should always remain under Jewish sovereignty. He says, we have no argument about that. It's a Jewish holy place. And then he goes and says, of course, but the Temple Mount is ours. It's not yours. And you need to stop talking about it, he said. He says, the status quo since 1967, which was set by Moshe Dayan, I think we both need to aim for that. So, on the one hand, some people are really impressed with the fact that he started talking about the Western Wall as being Jewish.
Which he denied, by the way.
And then afterwards he denied it, right.
The next day.
On the other hand, you know what? Maybe this is a new ploy, a new game, setting higher stakes, you know? Like, as far as I'm concerned, let them take the Western Wall, because it means nothing really to the Jewish people. What we really need is the Temple Mount. Mm-hmm. But I guess he sees that the Jewish people don't care about the Temple Mount, or maybe he's afraid because he sees how much the Jewish people do care about the Temple Mount and the tremendous awakening and the world record. Since Temple times, never has there been what happened on Jerusalem Day 2 weeks ago. Over 1,000 Jews ascended the Temple Mount in one day. Today, 150 Jews ascended the Temple Mount. Every day, it can't be stopped. And so maybe they're thinking, you know what, we better put the brakes on this and make sure it's understood. You know what, take the Western Wall, but we'll keep the Temple Mount.
That just tells me we got to keep bringing more and more people up there.
In the meantime...
eventually they can have, I'll concede, they can have Mecca.
You'll concede that? That's very big of you.
Mecca, yeah.
Very large of you, as we say in
It's
Hebrew.
large of me, yes.
Largesse. In the meantime, the Supreme Muslim Council, the Waqf, immediately made a statement distancing themselves from Jabrul's statement, saying, no, it's absolutely sacred to the Waqf. Every inch of the Temple Mount compound, including the Kotel, everything, it's all sacred only to Islam. But I didn't get to what I want to get to yet on the background of parashat Beha'alotcha. I want to connect the dots between Donald J. Trump's moving of the United States Embassy, and thus his non-recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital during the 50th year of the liberation of Jerusalem, when it would have been such a precious move. I want to connect that to the horrible terrorist attacks that are going on all over the world. And I want to ask you if you think there might be any connection. So, fasten your seatbelts, and we will examine that question when we return, God willing, very shortly to Temple Talk.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven, with me, Rabbi Chaim Richman, here in Jerusalem, Israel, the capital, eternal capital, undivided capital, liberated, united Jerusalem, place of the Holy Temple. Stick that in your fancy
Embassy.
hair, Mr. Trump. And today is the 12th day of the month of Sivan. We were saying earlier, it is the 7th day of the one-day festival of Shavuot.
In a way.
In a way.
In a manner of speaking.
Because, as the rabbi explained before, there are just so many Israelites, so many Jews want to bring their offerings up to the Holy Temple, and it's just too much for one day. So the gates remain open, and you can bring up your offerings. In fact, the Bikurim, the first fruit offerings, you could bring all summer, couldn't you?
Yes, Shavuot, the Festival of Weeks, is the beginning of the season of bringing the first fruits. It's called the Festival of First Fruits. It's the launching, as it were, the beginning of the season of bringing the first fruits, which can be brought all the way through Sukkot. And actually...
Even later.
Even later, but if you bring it already past Sukkot, then they have to be without the recital.
It's truncated.
Right.
Truncated ceremony.
Version.
And parashat Beha'alotcha this coming Shabbat, which we began talking about. I know you want to talk about the terror attack in London.
Well,
Rabbi.
the thing is, again, and the White House press secretary also clarified to reporters that President Trump intends to move the embassy to Jerusalem. It's only a question of when and not if, and all this business. But you know what? Everything is connected, and the message that is being broadcast to the world regarding Islamic terror, which is the true scourge of humanity. Even when that message is there's an attempt to get it out there like in a strong way, it's not working. It's not working because the political correctness and the fear of just what the international community thinks is the right thing. It's crippled the world completely. So listen, I don't know how many news outlets actually reported that the London stabbers shouted, "This is for Allah,"
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they did that or not. The attackers on Saturday night's terrorist car ramming on London Bridge and the nearby Borough Market. But what happened was these men left the van, shouting, "This is for Allah." And how many people were killed in those attacks? Up to 7, I think. I think
7.
Of course, there's been a long string of terrible Islamist terrorist attacks in the UK in recent years, including 2 in the last 2 months. Right, May 2017 was the Manchester Arena bombing. Right. A suicide bomber detonated outside a pop concert by teen idol Ariana Grande in Manchester, killing 22 people and injuring 116. By the way, 7 of those victims were under the age of 18. And then March 2017, the Westminster Bridge attack, in which 5 people were killed and more than 50 wounded when a man rammed his car into pedestrians on Westminster Bridge before crashing into the barriers and then stabbing a police officer to death. 2015, there was an underground stabbing. And then, of course, back 2013, there was a British soldier that was hacked to death. And throughout the years, the thing is, there's been a whole thing the world seems to be like waking up to now, or noticing that there's such a thing as using vehicles as weapons. So there's a whole analysis in CNN about this whole phenomena of vehicles as weapon, and they said it's a trend. Just CNN said this London attack is part of a terror trend, and so then they had a list here on CNN of the most significant recent attacks and the reasons behind them. And this is what's really interesting about these total idiots at CNN.
Yeah.
That they have this list, and then they have reasons. They give the reasons, like they'll say it's because this person became radicalized very very quickly. This person was sick of seeing fellow Muslims killed and tortured. Or this person is a supporter of the Islamic State. The way they put it, like
legitimate reasons. They're all nice fellows, legitimate reasons.
But they were radicalized very, very. So they made this list.
You can't blame a person for being radicalized, Rabbi. It can happen to
especially when
anyone.
it happens quickly. It happens
quickly.
so quickly.
You don't have any defenses against it.
Johnny, we hardly knew ye. So here's the thing. They had this list, and the list went something like this. Okay, Stockholm, Sweden, date of attack, April 7, 2017. 4 people were killed and 15 injured. London, March 22nd. 5 people were killed. An assailant rammed his car into his rental car into pedestrians on Westminster Bridge, not far from the UK Parliament. The suspect then entered Parliament grounds and fatally stabbed a police officer before being shot dead by other officers. Nice, France, July 14th, 2016. 84 people were killed. Remember that? More than 200 wounded when Mohammed Lahourege Bouhal used a 20-ton truck to strike hundreds of people in Nice when large crowds had gathered to watch Bastille Day fireworks, and the truck barreled through the crowd for almost a mile before he was shot and killed. And then again, like CNN has this adorable analysis, And the French Interior Minister said that he had no record of making militant statements. He was not believed to be a member of ISIS. And then in Berlin, December 19th, 2016, 12 people were killed and 48 wounded when a tractor-trailer rammed into a crowd at a bustling Christmas market filled with holiday shoppers. November 28th, 2016, in Ohio State University, 11 people were wounded when Abdul Razak Ali Artan, an Ohio State University student, rammed his car into a group of pedestrians on the campus. Remember that, Yitzchak?
Mm-hmm.
He got out afterwards and lunged at passerbys with a knife. And then in this list on CNN, there's Jerusalem.
Oh.
January 8th, 2017, where 4 soldiers were killed and at least 10 people wounded. 28-year-old Fadi Kunbar plowed into a group of Israeli soldiers on a popular promenade overlooking the walled old city of Jerusalem. Then we have Quebec, October 20th, 2014. So here's the thing, Yitzchak.
What's the thing?
And I appreciate the fact that the at least there was the January 8th, 2017 attack that was listed. But I want to remind you of some other rammings that happened in Israel, okay?
Mm-hmm.
April 6th, 2017, when an Israeli soldier was killed outside Ofra.
Mm-hmm.
When a Palestinian rammed into the bus stop. April 15th, remember Shalom Sharkey, the son of Uri Sharkey, was killed and his girlfriend was seriously injured. It was Holocaust Remembrance Day when Khalid Kutina ran his car into a bus stop. October 13th, 2015. That was a day when there were multiple attacks the same day. There was a stabbing and shooting attack on a bus in southern Jerusalem, and Rabbi Yeshayahu Khrushchevsky was struck by a car in Jerusalem simultaneously as the bus attack was happening. November 4th, 2015, a Palestinian terrorist purposely rammed his car into Staff Sergeant Benjamin Yakovich. November 5th, 2014, a 3-month-old child and a 22-year-old woman were killed when a Palestinian drove his car into a light rail station. My point being,
if you want to follow the latest trends in terror, you should just look at what's happened in Israel. And
okay.
You'll find out the trend to come to your neighborhood.
And in order to remind myself of these terrible rammings, I was looking at a collective, a summary of all the horrible things that have been happening, and I reminded myself of other things that are not in this list because I only wanted to talk about the rammings, but I reminded myself of other stabbings and explosives and shootings and horrible things. Reminded myself that from the Oslo Accords, which were September 1993, until September 2000, 300 Israelis were killed. During what was called the Al-Aqsa Intifada, which was 2000 to 2005, do you remember that 1,100 Israelis were killed? 1,100 Israelis were murdered during those 5 years. And that's since December 2005. Since then, Palestinian terror attacks have claimed at least another 203 Israeli lives. According to the data compiled by the Shin Bet, 2015 was the deadliest year for terrorism. Since 2008, wherein 28 people were killed in terror attacks on Israel. My point being, all this is not a trend and not new. But the first thing that we have to ask is, what is Britain currently occupying? I know that the sun never sets on the English Empire, and I know that Britain is very, very colonialist, and that they occupy a lot of countries. Do they still do that? Really?
Not much.
So what exactly does Great Britain have to do with the West Bank
with
or
Muslim
something?
angst?
Muslim angst. Ohio State University.
Balfour, come on! They came up with the Balfour Declaration. They got to pay for that.
Again, besides the fact that the ultimate gall and total chutzpah of anybody believing this merchandise that's being peddled by Abbas and by all of these people still, that Jerusalem has to be the capital and that the whole problem of peace in the Middle East and all over the world is the Israeli settlements. just so conveniently forgets the fact that this organization, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which is the same thing exactly as the Palestinian Authority and headed by the same people, was founded before there were any West Bank settlements. It was founded before the June 4th, 1967 lines, because it was founded in 1964. So what does it have to do with it? But the point is, this trend, they're like talking, the pundits and the news analysis, about a new trend that vehicles are being used for terror rammings. This has been going on for so long. And when Israel was going through it, when beautiful Jewish children, young men, babies, women were being murdered, and all these incidents that I cited and more, like, did it raise an eyebrow? Did it raise an eyebrow? And Israel is the first to join with Great Britain and express sympathy and outrage for what happened, right? Where are we? Where are we? We stand alone all the time. And this whole scenario is being strengthened and propagated by a move like the one that was taken out by the President of the United States, genuflecting to the ruler of Saudi Arabia and attempting to make this pan-Arab allegiance and this whole regional thing, that we're all going to be friends now. They're going to be friends with Israel because we're all going to fight terror together. And then going and not moving the embassy and showing, well, maybe there is something to it. Maybe the Jews don't belong in Jerusalem. Maybe there isn't really any Jewish connection. We love you, but you know what? I better save this on the shelf for negotiations and see what, because it's business, and I'm going to make you a great deal. It's going to be a great deal. The deal fell through. And this is why terror seems to win, because the lack of integrity and the lack of the strength to be able to make a stand to these bloodthirsty monsters and say, this is as far as it's going, they won't do it. They won't do it, and Trump won't do it either, because he just doesn't have what it takes.
Getting back to the parashat, Rabbi, for a little balance here. A very fascinating parasha, which really it's the best of times and the worst of times, and of course it opens with the concluding ceremonies and details of the inauguration of the tabernacle, which is a subject that the Torah is just fascinated with and loves, and we can only imagine that the Torah is so fascinated with this is because the service in the tabernacle / holy temple is so important and so intrinsic to our existence and our being in this world that it keeps hearkening back to it. This time I think it's really for the final time in the 5 books, and the immediate aftermath is description of how the encampment will move forward when the cloud of glory rises up, and how it will stop and set up camp again when that cloud of glory descends again. Basically, we were in sync. The nation of Israel was in complete sync with God's presence. It was like a dance. It was like a slow dance. It was beautiful. It was intimate, and of course the height of that are those 2 verses which describe that what you mentioned before with the inverted nuns, that describe just how perfectly in sync we were with God, and that is the goal of our existence, to just be able to rise and move forward in the direction and the distance that God decides for us to rise and move forward in, and then to stop and pause again when God decides it's time to stop and pause again. And it may be for a day, it may be for 5 days, it may be for 5 years, but it is God's will, and we are in complete sync with it.
It's such a beautiful way of looking at it, because it also, expresses the idea that it's, besides the fact that it's like this choreographed movement, of togetherness, it's like that's the whole purpose of movement. The whole purpose of movement is to follow Hashem's will. And this is the picture of a nation that is completely living for and with and of Hashem's presence.
And-
And that's who we have to be. That's why he took us out of Egypt in the first place. He says it over and over and over again. I took you out of Egypt in order to be for you a God. And all of these issues, it's like you have the complainers in this week's Torah portion, and then it's like you said, the best of times and the worst times. You're beginning with the light of the menorah, like bring it into the world. You have the incredible courage and initiative of those that wanted to bring the second Passover, speaking up before Hashem and saying, "Wait, don't leave us behind." You have the divine signs of Israel's camp moving, and you have the inverted nuns, and you have the trumpets, and the idea is like this is the way it's supposed to be. And here we are, like I said, in this backdrop of everything that we're studying here in the book of Numbers, because this is us, this generation. And here we are, 50 years into the modern biblical miracle of the unification of Jerusalem and the liberation of Jerusalem and Judea and Samaria. Here it is. It's our treasure. It's our home. It's the answer to everything. It's the answer to everything that we need, is just to decide that we're actually staying, that we're actually here, that this is our country, and to dismantle the civil administration that is in charge of Judea and Samaria, and to impose Israeli law on the entire country, and to say, Jews, you're welcome to settle and to build your homes here. We're no longer going to be sitting on the fence and not quite sure if we should be here and if we shouldn't be here. It's all one. Everything that we're reading about in this Torah portion and this Jubilee year, and the whole concept of what Jerusalem is in Torah and is to us, and what the world is going through now, and all these dots being connected, it's all one cosmic theme.
And when we continue in the parsha and things start to go south and things start to fall apart, it would seem, again, it's the constant struggle of man's will and God's will, and man seeking to bring his will closer to God's will. And the fact of the matter is that if it weren't for the tabernacle, if it weren't for that center of gravity, as you described, I think, was it in last week's or 2 weeks ago, that the parsha, that the tabernacle / holy temple it's our sun, it's our center of gravity. But instead of pulling us down to earth, it raises us up to heavens. That if it weren't for that, then there would be no Torah, because it would have all been lost and forgotten and dissipated thousands of years ago. That despite almost the efforts of man, as you pointed out, there were complainers who were looking to complain, people who almost wanted to sabotage this beautiful harmony between Israel and God and the tabernacle. That despite that center of gravity, God's presence in our midst is what pulled us through those 40 years in the desert, and what brought us into the land of Israel, and what is still abiding with us today, and the reason why we continue to move forward in sync with God, despite all the naysayers, despite all the broken promises, and despite all the weak knees, and all the lack of courage to call good good and call evil evil. Despite all that, we still move forward, and we're still getting closer to our goal, because this great center of our existence, the presence of God in our midst, is still with us in our journey.
Absolutely. And I just want to make it clear to you, I don't care if President Trump moves the embassy. Like I said,
I just want to know if he does.
It's still, it's my capital, and it's my city.
With or without you.
But I'm just saying to him, well, don't be surprised if it all falls apart.
Right.
Because you are not making the right statement, and you're not making it clear that you stand for the side of right and justice and righteousness. So don't be surprised. That's my message to Donald Trump about the embassy. I don't care, but just don't act like you're so surprised, or like, where is all this violence coming from and these attacks? It's coming from the fact that you are strengthening their hand by showing them that they could still win.
Right.
That's one thing. As far as the world is concerned, have a nice day. We've been going through this since time immemorial. I've been trying to tell you, you didn't want the Jews in Europe. You got the Europe that you have now. And you know what? I'm sorry, but nothing here is a surprise. And if you don't have the wherewithal to stand up and look at evil in the face and call it evil, then you're going to have more and more. As far as Israel is concerned, I wish that our leaders would have the holy audacity and the strength of character. And I think that they are getting it. I think that they are starting to really come around. I wish that they would realize that Hashem has put them in a position of tremendous responsibility and authority and wisdom and inspiration, and I bless them that should grow and grow, and that they should realize that it's their moment in history to honor God, to make a place for Him in this world, and to turn the state of Israel into what the Hashem promised it would be. And there's no time like this year to do that and to say, yes, this is our Jerusalem, this is our Judea and Samaria, this is our heartland, this is our land of Israel, period. And we are going to build here, build homes for our families and our children, and we're going to be here forever.
Here's the music. And just before we leave, I'd like to remind everybody that in another week and a half, Rabbi Richman will be in Texas, 2 speaking engagements in Abilene and in Lubbock. Please go to our Facebook page or our website for more details. Thank you so much for being with us here on Temple Talk.